What's up guys, and welcome back to episode 2 of this beginner's tutorial series. Today we're going over movement and jumping. We're also going to set up kind of one-way platforms. I'm going to comment the whole code in the comment section down below if you just want to copy and paste it. But I'd recommend having a look through and following the video just in case you get any problems with it. So with that being said, let's jump into it. So today we're going to make it so the player can move around the platforms with left and right movement and jumping. We're going to add platform effectors so you can jump up through the platforms and land on top. So first of all, we need to write our first script, which is going to be a player movement script. I'm going to take you through it step by step. It's going to be real easy if you don't know how to code. If you just want to skip to the final script, you can jump to this time now on screen, but I'd recommend you stay and watch how it's written and how it works so you get an understanding of it, and in future you can write your own. So first of all, we want to click add component with our player selected, and we're just going to name our script movement, and then we can hit new script and create. This will take a second to create the script, and then you can double click it and it will open Visual Studio and we can now edit it. So first of all, in here we want to make a fixed update, and that defaults to private. So what I did there, when it suggests something, you can just hit tab and it auto completes it. So fixed update here updates at a set amount of times per second, whereas update just updates every single frame. So we want to make it so our update detects the player's input as fast as possible every single frame, but our player movement happens within the fixed update, so you're linked to that frame rate. If we were to update the player in the update and you got a higher frame rate than someone else, it would update more, and if you're using like add velocity, you'll go faster or further. So we can get rid of this start method. This will just run before any of this code runs, but we don't need anything from it. We'll also get rid of this comment. So first of all, we need to declare some variables. So the first one is going to be a float, and it's going to be speed, because we want to determine how fast the player is going. We're also going to want movement, and this is going to be an axis between -1 and 1, and it's going to determine the direction the player is moving. We also want to define a rigid body, 2D, and I'm just going to call that RB, lowercase. So this is all we need for the player's movement of left and right. So let's jump into our update and we'll detect some input. So the first thing we need to do is set up that movement as an axis between -1 and 1, and depending on if it's -1 or 1, you'll move left or right. So we want to make our movement equal to, and there's a command set within Unity. You can get input.getAxis raw, and we can just set this to horizontal. Now this is pre-set up in Unity's inputs, and it's pre-bound to A and D. So when you press A, it goes to -1, and when you press D, it goes to 1, and when neither are pressed, you're at 0. So you'll move left or right depending on which keys are pressed. So this is mostly all you need for basic movement. So now if we jump into the fixed update, this is where we're going to write our code to actually update the player's position. And that's going to be linked to the rigid body that we set up. So we want to get our rigid body dot velocity. Now we're using velocity here, and we're like adding force to the player. So we're going to make rigid body equal to new vector2, and now we're going to set up here. So the velocity is just a 2D vector2 where you have x and y velocity because we've got a 2D rigid body. So now we need to set up that x and y. So our x, which is our left and right, is going to be equal to our movement multiplied by our speed. So this movement's going to be 1, -1 or 0. If it's -1, it's going to make the speed number negative and you're going to move left. If it's +1, it's going to make the speed number positive, you're going to move right. And if it's 0, 0 times anything is 0. And then we're just going to grab our Y number here. Now the reason we do this is we're not moving in the y-axis unless we jump. So the jump's going to add a number to this, but we then don't want this command to override whatever that adds. So this is just going to keep the same number that it already has. And that should be most of what we need for basic left or right. We can jump back into Unity, make sure I hit Control S then to save our script. Be sure you do that. It will have a little star here if you haven't. And then we play. Oh, one thing I messed up there. We need to be sure to drag our rigid body in that we've defined. And we also need to set speed, and we don't need to set the movement. So I'm just gonna set this to 2. So we'll test this out. So when we move left and right, you see here? So that's working as intended. We could boost the speed up a little bit. And that's our very basic movement for now. You'll see here, so movement 0. When I hold right, it goes to 1. When I hold left, it goes to -1. And when neither are selected, it's 0. And it's multiplying that speed by this number below to change the velocity. Now we've fallen off the map. It won't reset because we haven't set up a respawn. And we'll do that later, or potentially next episode. But for now, let's move on to jumping to get our player to be able to move between the platforms and not just endlessly walk left and right. Okay, so to carry on with this script but make it work for jumping, we're going to have to add a few more variables at the top here. So first of all, we're going to need some bools. And we're going to need, yeah, we'll do grounded as well now. So we're going to need jump, we're going to need grounded. So jump's going to be set to true when you need to jump. Grounded is going to be set to true when you're grounded. So that's pretty basic. We're going to need another float up here, and I'm going to call that jump force. And that should be most of what we need for now up here. So let's go down into our update. So our update is going to detect our input. So we've got our movement set up. Now we're going to set this up differently. We're going to do if, and basic if statement. If whatever you put in the bracket is true, anything in these brackets down here is going to run. So we're going to detect if the input of getting the key down is pressed. And we're going to get key code space. So this is going to check if you've pressed the key down. It runs only on the one frame when the key's pressed down. Whilst it's being held down, this does nothing. If you want to get it so when it's being held down, you just do get key. And you can also do get key up. But we only want it to return once. And here we're going to set jump equal to true. So whenever you press the key down, jump's going to set equal to true. And then we're going to link that down here so you jump when it's pressed down. So now, down here, we're going to set up another if statement, if jump. But we're also going to set and grounded. Now, we want to add the grounded so you can't just jump when you're in midair. And we're going to set up that in a minute. But for now, we're just going to set up this jump script. And actually, for now, we'll just remove this and we can test the jumping and then we'll add the grounding. So if jump, we're going to set it to rb.velocity. So this is the same as what we did here, but we're going to affect the other variable within it. So one way to do that is we can get the vector2.up. Now this is going to essentially add it to the velocity. Vector2.up is a vector of 0, 1, so it's only going to affect the y variable or the vertical variable that we're changing. And then we're going to also multiply that by our jump force. So whenever we press jump, this is going to run. We've got to be sure as well to jump is set to false after that, so this doesn't keep rerunning. So it plays it once, it jumps, and then jump set to false, and then the next time it doesn't run again until you press the button down again. So that should work for our basic jumping. If we jump back into Unity and test it, we're also going to have to set a jump force. Just set that to 10 and see how this works. So now we can jump. quite a long, smooth jump. You can mess with your numbers, but you'll see we can jump whilst we're in midair. And that's because it's not testing to see if we're grounded. So we can change that by changing our code and making it so it checks if you're grounded. So first of all, we want to check here, add an and grounded. So this within an if statement will make it so both variables have to be true, return true to be able to run the code inside. Now, to check if we're grounded, we're going to use another method down here. And it's going to be on collision. And we're going to do enter 2D. So whenever you touch it, the first time it's going to set this to true. Or it's going to run this code whenever you collide with an object. So now we've obviously already set these up so you're colliding with them. So we can just write our code in here. Grounded equals to true. So whenever you touch an object, grounded gets set to true. And it's going to make sure that you're grounded here when you jump. And then we're also going to go grounded equals to false after you've jumped, because you've left the ground. Now, there's a few problems with this that I'll explain in a minute, but let's jump into it and test it real quick. So now we can jump there, and I'm spamming space and we can't jump until we touch the ground again. Now the problem you can have with this, and the main problem you'll see with this, well, there's two problems. Firstly, if I press jump whilst we're in midair, the second we touch the ground it's going to jump again, because that variable jump got set to true. If I show you here, jump here. So if I jump here and then press jump again, it gets set to true until you jump the next time. So we can fix that in a second. But the other problem is if we walk off the side, you can then jump, because that grounded is still set to true. So what we can do as well is set up another one. So when you leave the collision, so this is exactly the same but with exit instead of enter. When you leave the collision, it sets grounded to false, and we shouldn't need this anymore. But let's test it out anyway. Clear that. That's just because I updated the script whilst it was still running. If I restart it, we can jump like normal. Sweet. And it will jump one more time because jump was lined up. If we fall off the edge, you can't jump. So that's that working. So now we just need to get it so you don't press jump up here and then the next time you land it jumps again. Now, we can remove that entirely by whenever you press jump here in the movement, it could also check if you're grounded. Now the problem with that is it can feel a bit not very smooth with the movement when you go to press jump a millisecond before hitting the ground and it doesn't jump because technically at that moment you're not touching the ground. So what I like to do is set up a queued jump system where if you're within like 0.1 of a second of touching the ground and you press jump, you'll jump when you do hit the ground. So it like stores it up ready, kind of like it does now, but with just a short delay on it. So you don't have to copy this bit, this is just how I like to do it, and I find it makes the movement feel a lot smoother. So I'm going to set up some variables for that. So firstly we need wait time here, and that's going to be the time we wait between when you press jump to when you're allowed to then spring off the ground. And then we're also going to set up a variable called queue time, queue jump, and that's going to set when the jump's queued. So input, here we go. So we are gonna check here and grounded. So this is our input. It checks if you press the space bar and it checks if you're grounded. Now if you're not grounded, it wants to else if, and then this is going to check the input dot get key down the same as above space. So this is just checking for the button pressed down again. Now this may seem a bit redundant, but if this wasn't here, this code would just run on loop whenever you're not trying to jump. So this still checks if you are still wanting to jump and runs this code only once, but only if you don't jump because you're not grounded, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it should. So then we need to set the Q jump equal to true. So obviously you've tried to jump here because you've pressed space, but you're not grounded. So then it will run this code essentially. And then we also want to set the wait time equal to 0. So then down here, it's going to check if Q jump is activated, and if it is, that means you've tried to jump, it hasn't worked because you're not grounded. It sets the Q time to true, which will trigger this. So now we can set the wait time equal to time dot or plus equal to time dot delta time. So this statement here will just count up time and set it to the wait time, and then all we need to do is check if the wait time is greater than, and for this I'm going to put 0.5, and then if that's the case, Q jump is going to be set to false again, and that will untrigger this. So this is like our wait system. And then lastly, we need to add if Q jump and grounded. Whoops. And then we want jump to be set to true if that's the case, and then Q jump is equal to false. So that should be that, and I'll explain it quickly one more time. To make it easier to understand, I should move this down here. So all this statement here does is it's a timer that counts up to 0.5, and if it counts up to that long, it disables the Q jump system by setting Q jump to false, meaning you haven't touched the ground after 0.5 after pressing space. Now you can set this to whatever you want, but this is the main thing up here. So you try to jump, it doesn't go off because you're not grounded. So what happens is checks to see if you press space to be sure. It sets that Q jump because you've clearly tried to jump because space has been pressed, but you haven't jumped. So it will just reset the wait time here. And then it will start this counting timer. If you land or are grounded during the duration of that Q time, and Q jump is still activated, you'll jump and it will reset it. But if you don't, then it will just turn Q jump off. So I hope that makes sense. If not, you can just copy it. But let's just show you how that works in here. So we'll jump here. If I press jump again, see we don't land and jump. And you'll see here Q jump will be active for half a second. So if I jump close to the ground like now, it will jump and it can feel more responsive. And you can set that 0.5 to 0.1 to make it even harder, or you can make it even easier so it does jump more. But I just find it's easier because you can like line up the jump and it can feel a lot easier to play with. Now you'll notice there, we kind of stick to the edge of these objects if we walk into them. That's because of the material they're made out of, and we're going to change that in a different episode, just in case you noticed that. Okay, so now, lastly, what we're going to do quickly today. Firstly, drag this movement script into our scripts folder to organize, and then we're going to select our platform prefab. And we're going to add a platform effector 2D. And for this to work, you need to set the collider box to use by effector. And that's all you need for one-way platforms. So this arc represents the angles at which you can collide with the platform, and it remains solid, and the angles at which you can remain, it doesn't remain solid, i.e. the bottom half. And you can set this to less if you want to be able to jump diagonally from the sides and pass through. If it's set to 180 and you collide with the side, it will be solid. So we can test that. So here in our scene, if I jump up, see we can now jump up through the platforms and land on them. And they all work like this. But you'll see if I collide with the side of it, we still collided with that. And gravity kind of feels a little bit slow, so you can also play with that. I mean, you can change all these numbers and get the movement feeling however you want it. It feels like we're a little bit floaty down, so I might just go to 1.5 on the gravity. And it can feel just a little bit more responsive. So that's our basic player movement. So next episode we're going to set it so the player respawns when they fall off and you don't have to restart the game. We're also going to add a little game essentially to it. We're going to throw some more platforms around. We're going to have some spawnable objects. And you've essentially got to pick them up all as fast as possible. And we'll have a little timer. And it will start building into an actual game then. And then after that I've got planned episodes for menu system, saving system. And then we'll maybe look into like procedural generation of levels of our little, you spawn in, you jump around, you've got to collect all the gems or whatever it is in the shortest amount of time possible. That just about wraps up this video. Thanks for watching guys. Be sure to like, subscribe, there's more videos here if you want to check them out, and I'll catch you next time.